Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's program. To get things started, I'm going to turn things over to UMB President, Dr. Bruce Jarrell.
Good afternoon and welcome to the University of Maryland, Baltimore's celebration of Black History Month and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm so glad you've joined us, and I want to thank the group that put that video together. It was a great opening video. It's inspiring and brings back many wonderful memories. We are here today to honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose commitment to justice, anti-racism, equality, and equity remain guiding principles for all of us today. Dr. King had many quotes. I think my favorite quote is a quote that many of you have heard from him. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort or convenience, but where he stands at times of controversy and challenge. I find myself thinking of that very often, every day. We're still in a pandemic, but we're also faced with many other challenges of our social, economic, the health disparities of this country, and other problems that we need to solve. Our celebration of Dr. King and Black History Month serves as our call to action, a challenge to get to work, as well as an inspiration. I hope that in these times of challenge, you will join me in redoubling all of our efforts to fulfill Dr. King's dream. I'm committed to fulfilling this dream at UMB, and my hope is that all members of our community will have a sense of belonging and the ability to thrive and fulfill their potential in the UMB community. Of course, I will need your help in advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion at UMB. It's part of our core principles, but it takes all of us to make that happen. Collaboration, intentional effort, leadership, and focus on this important topic. Again, thank you for being with us here today. We have a very interesting and inspiring program, and as always, the Diversity Advisory Council has worked hard to put this wonderful event together, and I want to thank each and every one of you who worked on this. It looks like a great plan that we're going to see in the next hour. I also want to both welcome and thank UMB's Chief Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer, Vice President Dr. Diane Forbes-Berthoud, for being here, and you'll get an opportunity to hear from her just a little later on in the program. To set the stage for this program, we are again fortunate to have the Morgan State University Choir join us. They will be performing Lift Every Voice and Sing. This was written as a poem by NAACP leader James Weldon Johnson in 1900. Set to music by his brother John Rosamond Johnson, and first performed by 500 school children at the segregated Stanton School in Jacksonville, Florida. They sang it to celebrate President Abraham Lincoln's birthday. Many of you know the song, and it's often referred to as the Black National Anthem. And it was used prominently in the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s. And I think it continues to rally folks and inspire all of us to make change. So please welcome the Morgan State University Choir.
Voice and sing.
Thank you so much to our Morgan State University Choir. It's so great to be able to have them come together virtually to make that wonderful video. And now back over to Dr. Bruce Gerald.
Thank you, Janet. It's a pleasure to be back. It was a great choir presentation to all of us. I hope you all didn't have too many technical difficulties, but you could tell the power and the passion behind those singers. So a great thing to hear. And I thank the Morgan State University Choir for sharing their talent with us. It's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Lawrence T. Brown. Dr. Lawrence Brown is an equity scientist, an urban Afrofuturist, and the director of the Black Butterfly Academy, a virtual racial equity education and consulting firm. From 2013 through 2019, he served as an assistant and then associate professor at Morgan State University in their School of Community Health and Policy. In June of 2018, he was honored by the Open Society Institute, Baltimore, with the Bold Thinker Award for sparking critical discourse regarding Baltimore's racial segregation. In 2020, he directed the U.S. COVID-19 Atlas work and response for the County Health Ranking and Roadmaps program in partnership with the University of Chicago Center for Spatial Data Science. His first book, The Black Butterfly, The Harmful Politics of Race and Space in America, was published by the Johns Hopkins University Press in January of 2021. Dr. Brown's current work at the Center for Urban Health Equity at Morgan State includes the Black Butterfly Rising Initiative, which builds on the information in his book. The project includes developing a history exhibit about Baltimore and creating a website called the Black Butterfly Data and Impact Hub, where users can look at statistics such as bank lending, rent, mortgage burden, and crime for particular areas. We are grateful to have Dr. Brown with us today. Dr. Brown, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, everyone. It's always a beautiful day, especially when I have the pleasure of hearing the Morgan State University Choir as a part of the introduction. So thank you all for being here. I really appreciate the Diversity Advisory Council for the invitation. Dr. Fahey, really appreciate you welcoming me to this august occasion. In the middle of a pandemic, we know that it's a difficult time for many of us right now, and certainly for the nation, as we cross over 900,000 deaths due to the COVID pandemic. So with that backdrop in mind, I want to start with the title of my presentation today, which is the work of Dr. King and reimagining Baltimore. So I want to start with the notion that everyday people can do great things. And I, in part, imagine myself speaking to the UMB Cure Scholars when I say this particular slide, but I think that it also applies to everyone that's in attendance, because I think when we think about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we've almost put him on a kind of pedestal. We've almost turned, let me come off of my share screen for 1 second. We've almost turned Dr. King into a Marvel or DC superhero, that he just can fly all over the place and he has superpower like Superman or somebody. And Dr. King was a regular human being. And that's what I want to remind, that he had, that his humanity, we certainly think of him as this great orator and preacher and someone who had a message for the country, but here he is as a teenager getting arrested, you know, as a young man with that hat on, fighting for what he believed in. Here he is over here eating. We often don't see pictures of Dr. King at the table, the dinner table, perhaps, you know, talking and having a conversation, eating, or we don't imagine Dr. King smiling very often. There's Dr. King with an expression of pure joy on his face. And then here's Dr. King during the March Against Fear in 1966. Again, they're smiling, they're having a good time, even though they're on this major civil rights march. You know, it's a hot summer day, and there they are walking on the road. And this reminds us that even though Dr. King was, of course, one of the greatest Americans in our country's history, everyday people. And Dr. King was a regular person, but regular people can do great things. And this keeps us from deifying Dr. King and acting as if only great people can do great things. If we remind ourselves that he was regular, he was in the common parlance, he was just a regular dude that did great things. And so this means that we also have a responsibility, no matter how regular you may be. Everyday people can and must do great things. And this is a reminder that in West Baltimore, there's a long history of civil rights activism. You have the Stewart sisters in the 1880s. They were fighting against transit discrimination along a steamboat, like the one you see here at the bottom left. And you had these four sisters, Martha, Winnie, Mary, and Lucy. They had first-class accommodations. They were supposed to be on the top deck. They were placed on the bottom deck. And they actually sued the steamboat company and won their particular case. So they were fighting for transit equity. You have these Black men right here with Reverend Harvey Johnson in the top and in the middle, fighting in West Baltimore, Union Baptist Church, where he was the pastor. That's Pennsylvania and Dauphin, fighting for educational equity, and they had a group called the Mutual Brotherhood of Liberty. So you can read more about this deep history in Baltimore. So Dr. King wasn't fighting alone. It was everyday people doing great things, and that's the call and the task before us. So I also want to say that Dr. King did have a dream. We know he had a dream. I have a dream today. We know that famous speech, but he also had a plan. He had a plan, and he was about action, not just dreaming, not just wishing, but having a plan for action. So Dr. King, for instance, went up south, as you can see there in quotes, to Chicago in 1966. We mostly think of Dr. King as organizing, pushing, agitating, protesting, sitting in the deep south, but he went up north, or colloquially up south, to Chicago in 1966. Him and his wife, Coretta, their 4 children, they moved to Chicago for a year to join the Chicago Freedom Movement. And let's look at the third paragraph here. Our primary objective, and he's the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference at the time, our primary objective would be to bring about the unconditional surrender of forces dedicated to the creation and maintenance of slums, and ultimately to make slums a moral and financial liability upon the whole community. We do not hold that Chicago is alone among cities with a slum problem, but certainly we know that slum conditions here are the prototype of those chiefly responsible for the northern urban race problem. And so here's where we actually see that American racism is not just confined to the Deep South. It's also something that is urban in our large cities and outside of the Deep South in the North. So we can divorce ourselves of that notion that, oh, all the problems in the Deep South. No, 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 no. Issues are in the North. Issues are in the North. And Baltimore is a city that is sort of in the middle, perhaps best described as being in the upper South. But Baltimore City has a role to play in this issue of racial segregation, and the slums. In the 70s, it became known as the ghetto, and today it's often called the hood in common parlance. And so they're saying, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, his organization, that these slums, these ghettos, these hoods should not exist. In the richest country on the planet of the earth, we have the wealth to erase slum conditions, to erase poverty. And they had a plan: protest, organize, voting, sitting in, whatever it took to help eliminate America's poverty, impoverished communities. So this is what his plan, and this is what they involved. He joined the Chicago Freedom Movement to help desegregate Chicago. So they also had another plan called the Freedom Budget. So again, Dr. King wasn't just dreaming. He was talking about how money is allocated, how budgets are spent in America. And look at what they're calling for: the abolition of poverty, full employment, health services. All right, now I'm in public health, so now we're talking about my field. Health services for all, education for all. And here we are over 50 years later, and I'm here to tell you we still have not achieved these things in our country. You don't need me to tell you that. Just go out in West Baltimore and you will see for yourself. So we have not achieved the dream, and perhaps it's because we have not followed the plan of having a freedom budget. And we can't have a freedom budget if we're spending so much money on the military or so much money on policing that we don't spend money on these issues that were outlined in the freedom budget. And again, in the introduction, he's saying in his foreword that we shall eliminate slums for Negroes, what Black people were called back then, when we destroy ghettos and build new cities for all. So in other words, these ghettos, these slums, these hoods should not exist. We should not have poverty at all. That's what a freedom budget would help to achieve. If we had the notion, if we followed Dr. King's notion that we eliminated unemployment, that we have full and fair employment for all, education We have skilled Negro folks that have a 20th century education system for all. We still haven't achieved any of these as a nation. We still have triple the unemployment rate for Black folks. We still have an education system, public school systems that are underfunded in urban areas, particularly for African American children. So we still have not achieved eliminating slums in our society. And this is what Dr. King is calling for in the Freedom Budget. So again, these are the types of objectives. So I'm just highlighting, you can read them for yourself. I'm highlighting the fact that Dr. King didn't just have a dream. He had a concrete plan, and they were looking at the budget, the money that is spent, because wherever you spend your money, that is where your priorities are. And that's true whether we are individuals or for us as a society. So this is Dr. King's vision. This is the concrete plan he was working on, the Freedom Budget 1966 in northern urban areas to eliminate slum impoverished conditions in the greatest, wealthiest country in the history of the world. So now let's look at Baltimore City, racial segregation in Baltimore City, because Baltimore was actually the first city in American history to pass a residential racial zoning law on December the 19th, 1910. And there's the man in the middle. It's always the man in the middle. Now, Mayor John Barry Mahul, he passed the first residential racial zoning law in American history. And you can download this article, search for it online. This is from the New York Times. December the 19th is the day that the law was passed. This was published December 25th, Christmas Day, 1910, 12 years ago. And so you can see the title, Baltimore tries drastic plan of race segregation. So this is drastic. So this tells us that racial segregation was not just some event that, oops, kind of happened. It wasn't artificial, like it's just always existed. No, people worked to make racial segregation and racial domination a reality, dominating not just people, but domination of space. And so we see Mayor Mahul sign the ordinance. Even in the next year, Baltimore continues to pass these ordinances, pushing these laws to help segregate where then Negro people could live and also where white people could live. And this law was so pervasive that it didn't just segregate Black people from white people based on where they lived. It also separated and segregated based on schools. If it was a predominantly Black block, only Black schools could be located in that block. It separated and segregated where churches could be located. So if it was a majority white block, then only a white church could be built on that block. So this was a cleaving and an apartheid, segregating and separating Black Baltimoreans from white Baltimoreans completely, system by system, domain by domain. Swimming pools were racially segregated. Parks and recs were racially segregated. Like I said, churches were racially segregated. So this is the pervasiveness and urban apartheid, as we're seeing from this article. You can read it, primary source evidence in real time. That's my favorite evidence. Or as the young people might say, the receipts. You can see what was being said in real time. And actually, you probably can't see, but it's really small right here. On your computer screen, the New York Times even has this language where the Negro invasion has depreciated value. So this stigmatizing, racialized, racist language, Negro invasion, is also in this article. So this is a tremendous artifact capturing in real time how racial segregation unfolded in Baltimore City. And so that was 1910, but in 1937, the federal government became involved. And so here we have on the left what was known as the Residential Security Map. We see that on the legend. This is the technical name, although many people refer to this as the redlining map. We see the technical name is Residential Security Map. And it has 4 colors, not just red, yellow, blue, and green. And this map determined which neighborhoods could receive access to capital. And if you read in Tara Patella's book, Not in my neighborhood. How bigotry shaped the great American city, I believe, is chapter 5. He has a chapter called Mapping Bigotry. He outlines the racialized history of this map right here. Basically, blue and green neighborhoods, banks love to see them. Low interest rates, oh, you could get a lot of money to buy a home or to fund your small business. But if you lived in the yellow or red neighborhood, the banks were very reticent, especially if you lived in a red neighborhood. And while white and Anglo-Saxon people lived in blue and green communities, Jewish people lived in blue communities, European immigrants lived in yellow communities, African Americans were relegated to those red colored communities. So these communities, red line black communities, were essentially defunded. These are the communities that were denied access to capital. And you may say, well, Dr. Brown, that was 80 some years ago. What does that have to do with today? Well, let's look at the data, because on the right side of this slide, what we see is the Zillow analysis of home values between 1997 and 2017, a 20-year period. And we see that the homes that are in the red colored communities in the city still have home values far less than those in the yellow, blue, and green neighborhoods. And it's not just that they're less. Look at this. It's a $50,000 gap in 1997, but look at how the gap has grown larger. So that by 2017, the gap between the red and the top colored community, which is blue, is double what it was in 1997. So this is not a problem. The impact of those policies from 80 years plus ago is not just still with us, but the damage is getting worse. We're not getting better. The economic damage from racial segregation, or rather the economic weaponization of racial segregation, the damage that has inflicted is not getting better. It is getting worse because we have not, again, attended to the levers of power, policies, practices, systems, and budgets. We have not done that as a society. And that is what Dr. King was talking about. He was not just dreaming. He was talking about money, budgets, restoration, reparations. That is what his message was all about. And then we can take a look at public housing in Baltimore. The Public Housing Authority is the housing authority of Baltimore City. And looking at the 40s and 60s in particular, where was public housing placed? The darker the gray, the more black people lived in those census tracts. We can see that the public housing communities were placed in the black neighborhoods. You don't see public housing up here in Mount Washington, Roland Park, Guilford, Homeland, Laurelville, those nice segregated white communities. No. You see public housing concentrated intentionally, even in the age of desegregation, 1980, after the 1968 Fair Housing Act. We see that these scatter sites, the yellow dots, smaller, flatter public housing communities, they're also concentrated in black neighborhoods. Not Mount Washington, not Roland Park, Guilford, Homeland, Laurelville. No. Public housing is concentrated in black neighborhoods. This is intentional public policy. This is what Dr. King was really fighting and facing. The slums that were placed, black neighborhoods were created from a policy perspective to be the reservoir for the poor. We have not allowed black neighborhoods to thrive. And so that is why today, if you look at this racial dot map from Dustin Cable, who was at the University of Virginia, where one dot per person, blue dots represent white people, green dots represent black folks, red dots represent Asian folks, orange dots represent Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx, and brown dots at the bottom here is other race, Native American. We have a small Lumbee tribe community in Upper Fells Point in Baltimore. But you can see we are a hyper-segregated city. In fact, a Category 5 hyper-segregated city today, because we still have not desegregated. We have not made Dr. King's dream and his plan a reality. So you see here, we have the white L, what I call the black butterfly, what I call the Asian archipelago, and the Latino, Latina, Latinx lagoon. So we are a hyper-segregated city to this day. And again, the damage of segregation It's not that white and black people can't, or black people can't live and be successful without living in proximity to white people. That's not the damage of segregation. The damage of segregation is the economic weaponization. So now that you've segregated people, now you can redline. Now you can subprime. Now you can marginalize, demonize. You can put payday lending facilities. You can put in check cashing facilities. You can put in all kinds of facilities that extract wealth. Slumlords that extract wealth. That is the damage. And so for those of you who may be in nursing, in public health, in medicine, what are we really doing? I'm in public health. What are we really doing as it relates to making our communities healthy when we have this dynamic going on? Extraction of wealth, defunding black neighborhoods, destroying and uprooting communities, particularly in the black butterfly. So this is where we are. And my time is almost up. So let me talk about reimagining Baltimore City. So I'm honing in on the Cure Scholars. I love the work that the university is doing with these young people in West Baltimore. And I want to highlight Shakir Franklin, this young gentleman right here. He wrote a beautiful poem based on the black butterfly concept that you can see right here. But I'm going to share his video so that we can take a look at that for a couple of minutes. That is a 2-minute long video. So I just want to share that with you right about now.
Do you see the beauty of my city? Do you smell the air so sweet you can almost taste it? Look down, do you see the streets so clean? And the people as they live together in harmony as one community? Know that it was not always this way. Know that quite a journey we went through and made the butterfly you now see before you. Not long ago, just a few mere years, our lives were very different. Sure, we laughed and joked, high-fived and conversed, but secretly for many of us, and not so for most, we couldn't wait to escape back to our separate lives. Some of us lived in an oasis, with parks and multiples of 2s and 3s, with supermarkets big and galore, fruit so fresh it was as if it was just picked from a tree. While others lived in a desert with food so scarce that it could only be found in corner stores. We were caterpillars eating from the leaves of the tree and not caring for the health of it. No wonder so many of us became moths, until one day, tired of the strife, some of us decided to get together and change our city. So bit by bit, they went around gathering others who gathered others so that they could make our tree so pretty. And slowly a metamorphosis started to happen throughout my city. People working together that never worked together before. People picking up trash that never picked up trash before. And now, our transformation is complete. Butterflies we have become. So spread your wings, Baltimore, and show the world the change you've made from selfish caterpillars to selfless butterflies. Thank you.
So I love this poem. I had a chance to meet Shakir, and he's an inspiration to me. I mean, his poem is called Baltimore Imagined. And so that is, the imagination is again connected to what Dr. King did as a part of his work, which was again, to dream. We do have to dream. We have to imagine a Baltimore that's beyond crime, violence, and the social pathologies that are plaguing our city today. And this is what Shakir engaged in his poem. And as I wrap up, I want to say that there are solutions. There are plenty of solutions. There are no silver bullets, but there are plenty of solutions that we should be engaging in as a city. Many of them you can see have the word community in them. Community gardens, community benefits agreement, community organizing, Black neighborhood reparations to repair the damage that was inflicted, has been inflicted on Black neighborhoods, community health workers, community development, financial institutions. These are the types of things that we should be engaging in, advocating for, lobbying for, pushing for, protesting, marching, everything that Dr. King did. These are solutions, not just staying within the walls of the universities, being comfortable, not just going through our day, allowing Baltimore apartheid to proliferate, but actually pushing for the rebuilding of the Black butterfly. That is the work. This is the dream. This is Baltimore imagined. And so I'll leave you with these words here from the Negro National Anthem. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on until victory is won. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. That was engaging. I got a lot out of it. Thank you for sharing your work. You certainly brought some important things to my forefront, the freedom budget, the security plan. Thank you for showing us your perspectives, and thank you for showing us how we can continue to work to address these structures and inequities that have been foisted upon the Black community and which need to be changed. I don't want to be telling a tale of two unequal Baltimores anymore. I'm tired of that, and we at UMB have to do our part. I also want to thank you for showing that wonderful video of Shakir. He's come a long way, and it's so wonderful to see that great video. So thank you for showing that. At this point then in the program, Dr. Brown, thank you. And it's now my honor to recognize the 2022 Martin Luther King Jr. Diversity Award recipients. The Faculty Award goes to Dr. Ann Filauer from the School of Nursing. I'd like to present the 2022 Martin Luther King Jr. Diversity Award for the faculty to Dr. Anne Marie Filauer. Since 2016, Dr. Filauer has volunteered many days a week to mentor with the UMB Cure Scholars Program. She is known as Dr. Ann to the scholars. She leads the anatomy track for the Cure Scholars and has also taught students about food, about science, chemistry, even robotics. When the pandemic first hit and programs moved virtual, she made sure to begin her sessions by touching base with each of the scholars to see how they were doing. She made over 100 well-check calls to 10 scholars over several weeks. This helped them to connect with resources, let them know somebody cared about them, help them find things like masks and Wi-Fi for virtual learning. Thank you, Dr. Anne Marie Filauer, for your work with the Cure Scholars. Thank you, Anne. The next award is the Staff Award. This is going to the School of Pharmacy's Patient Program, and it's a work group, and you see their picture there. Our 2022 Martin Luther King Jr. Diversity Award for staff goes to members of the School of Pharmacy's Patients Program. In its mission to conduct patient-centered outcome research, the Patients Program at the School of Pharmacy prides itself on meeting the West Baltimore community, the members where they live, work, and worship. The Patients Program is being recognized for its engagement efforts with these individuals, particularly during the pandemic, as well as other initiatives that they have undertaken to enhance health equity in the city. The Patients Program launched a series of bi-weekly Facebook live events titled Real Time with Rodney and BJ's Corners, hosted by Rodney Elliott, engagement specialist, and Barbara Jean, BJ Robinson Shaneman, senior program specialist. They reached over 3,000 people. The Patients Program serves as a model of how to incorporate the community as partners in all stages of research. I thank you to the Patients Program for your efforts in continuing to address health equity. Thank you. Our third award is the Student Award to Sean Midgewin Kim in the School of Pharmacy. This is the 2022 Martin Luther King Jr. Diversity Award for Students to Sean Kim. Sean has served as the School of Pharmacy Class of 2023 President. He served in the Student Government Association as its secretary and also as its president. He has served as co-chair of the Interfraternity Council. He's a member of the School of Pharmacy's DEI Task Force. He's the student co-chair of the Maryland Pharmacy Coalition. Also helped to plan the Korean American Scientists and Engineer Association's virtual 2021 Young Generation Technical and Leadership Conference. He is also a student ambassador in the School of Pharmacy Career Navigation Program. This intends to organize professional development events and career fairs for students. I don't know where this list ends. He continues as a senator in the USGA and works with the USGA Affiliate International Students Organization to petition for changes to international student visa requirements regarding COVID-19 restrictions implemented during the Trump administration. He also volunteers with the UMB Health Alliance, another USGA affiliate in which students work to reduce gaps in healthcare access and services, social resources, and legal aid for West Baltimore residents. You are a busy person, Sean, and that's not even the end of it. Believe it or not, he's still a pharmacy student, as you might guess. And he also, with two other School of Pharmacy students, has launched a software company to simplify access to medication for travelers to East Asia. A very impressive set of accomplishments. Sean, thank you for bringing your energy and your enthusiasm to UMB. You set a wonderful example. Thank you, Sean. We also have in the event the school essay contest winners. I'm excited to introduce our next group of awardees. They are the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Oratorical Contest. This was created to showcase the talents and skills of the students from UMB's partnering elementary, middle, and high schools. Students were invited to express their vision of Dr. King through their experiences on our campus or in Baltimore City by submitting an essay, a spoken word poem, a poem, or rap or song. All students who submitted an entry to the contest will receive certificates. The first through third place winners in the elementary and middle school groups will receive a monetary prize. This year's third place essay winner in the elementary middle school division is Adrian Rice from James McHenry Middle School. Congratulations, Adrian. Second place goes to Miss Cecilia Soko, also from James McHenry. Congratulations, Cecilia. Special congratulations go to our first place winner, again from James McHenry Middle School, Mr. Morgan Grayson. Let's hear from our first place winner now. Morgan?
How to Help Our Community, written by Morgan Grayson. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, how are you helping others? Martin Luther King. What does that mean to you? To me, this quote shows how selfish some people were in history, especially in the 60s and 70s, based off of the time of the quote. Most people don't ask or think about others that are in need and how their selfish acts are hurting them in the process. This is why it's life's most persistent and urgent question. I feel like this quote can also connect to the civil rights movement in so many ways. This quote connects to the civil rights movement because most people who weren't of color didn't think of the consequences nor pain that people of color went through. Many public workers, such as police officers and firefighters, worked for politics that were very corrupt and fell through the life of Black people being bad. Those beliefs impacted the way of the city. I personally can't speak for public workers in the 60s and 70s, but I would personally feel and regret my actions if I ever disrespected a person of color. When I hear this quote, I can imagine a community working together, helping others hand in hand, which is probably what Martin Luther King imagined as well. Us working together means to help others in need and help people in need. For example, 9/11. In 9/11, firefighters and police officers helped the people who were in and around the Twin Towers. Helping others just won't help themselves, but the community and the people around you as well. For example, when people in the South stopped treating Black people terribly, a whole new mindset was created. This action created a different world where people can work together. Even if all people don't have this mindset, we can continue and make this world a better place for everyone, and we can show them how to help as well. In conclusion, this world is and might always be a really bad place. But we can stop this by working together because most people think more about themselves instead of others, and those others are suffering. Their actions were most likely influenced by how the world was 60 to 50 years ago. But we can stop this by answering life's most persistent and urgent question: how are we helping others?
All right, thank you, Morgan, and congratulations to you. Now I'd like to turn things over to UMB's Vice President and Chief Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer, Dr. Diane Forbes-Berthoud.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Jenna. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Dr. Brown for that amazing address on Martin Luther King's work. Congratulations to all the wonderful awardees. I love to see the young people, participating, sharing, leading in our community and in our region. Thank you so much, Dr. Brown, for challenging us to reimagine Baltimore, teaching us a little bit more history, and telling us about the power of ordinary people. And that Dr. King, in addition to being an ordinary person and extraordinary, he had a plan, and he was in the work of reimagining and working with many of our ancestors and relatives. A quote that stands out for me as we think about Black History Month and the work of Dr. King is, quote, that we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We're confronted with a fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life, Dr. King said, there is such a thing as being too late. There's no time for apathy or complacency. This is the time for vigorous and positive action, says Dr. King. And we thank Dr. Brown for reminding us of what may need to be done and what we might need to do together. UMB is honored to lead and to partner in many of these efforts in our city and in our region and on campus to advance the very important work of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Thank you again to everyone, to Dr. Brown, to the planners, and to all the awardees. Thank you so much for being here today. And at this time, we will watch a video entitled Service to the UMB Community, a video that features engagement of UMB staff, students, and faculty in the local community. Enjoy.
All right, we are coming up on the end of our program, so I'll turn things back over to Dr. Gerald.
Thank you, Dr. Ferbs-Berthoud, for your comments and for that wonderful video. UMB is committed to our community, and as Dr. King said, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. Before we conclude, I want to invite all of you in the audience to get additional inspiration by the next generation of young STEM leaders by viewing the CURE Scholars posters. It's available in Exhibit Hall on your front page. You will find a link to join at the top of your screen. Our UMB CURE Scholars program is a STEM pipeline, the first in the nation to start in the 6th grade. And this year we will graduate from the 12th grade, our first students, and going on to college right here in West Baltimore. I am so proud of our scholars and the staff and volunteers who support them. They're very amazing. In closing, thank you for being here today. A special thanks again to Dr. Lawrence Brown. Thank you for inspiring us. For all of you in the audience, thank you for being here. Please stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.